The galactic Concord was old, its member species having risen to interstellar prominence when humanity was still chipping flint in caves. They were the self-appointed custodians of galactic peace and order, a council of elder races who had seen empires rise and fall, stars born and die. From their serene, ancient citadels scattered across the galactic core, they viewed the burgeoning species of the spiral arms with a mixture of detached amusement and weary concern. Humanity, confined to their little spur of the Orion arm by carefully maintained and subtly enforced interstellar custom, was filed under adolescent species. High curiosity, low wisdom, potential for localized disruption, containment protocol, passive observation, minimal intervention. They were seen as boisterous, prone to reckless experimentation, and generally a minor but persistent headache, like a toddler constantly trying to stick a fork in a power socket. The research vessel Starseeker was a testament to that human recklessness, or, as its crew preferred, bold exploratory spirit. Captained by Aris Thorne, a man whose insatiable curiosity was matched only by his talent for bending regulations, the Starseeker was a long-range explorer tasked with charting empty regions of space, regions the Concord had subtly hinted were best left unexplored. The ship was small, a speck of human ingenuity against the vast canvas of the void, its crew a mix of idealistic scientists, grizzled engineers, and wide-eyed explorers. Their current mission: to investigate anomalous energy readings near a supposedly dead star system, designated RX-887, deep in a sector the Concord charts simply labeled Unremarkable Void. Dr. Lena Hansen, the ship's lead astrophysicist and xenoarchaeologist, was ecstatic. "The energy signatures are unlike anything I've seen, Aris," she'd said, her eyes gleaming. "They're not natural. They pulse with a regularity that suggests ancient technology, massive technology. Ancient, abandoned, and hopefully not booby-trapped," Aris had replied with his trademark grin, already nudging the Starseeker towards the source. What they found was not a dead star system, but a colossal, artificial construct camouflaged to mimic one. A sphere of black, featureless material, kilometers in diameter, that absorbed all light and sensor scans. It was only the faint, rhythmic energy pulse deep within that betrayed its artificiality. "Precursor," Lena breathed, awestruck. The Precursors were the galaxy's great mystery, an unimaginably advanced civilization that had vanished eons ago, leaving behind enigmatic artifacts and tantalizing hints of their power. "And they didn't want to be found," mumbled Jax, the ship's chief engineer, a man who preferred his technology understandable and preferably built by human hands. "That big black ball screams, 'Go away.'" Naturally, they didn't. The Starseeker spent days meticulously scanning the sphere, finding no apparent entrances, no markings, no way to interact with it. The energy pulses continued, like a slow, sleeping heartbeat. Lena discovered that the pulses were not energy emanating from the sphere, but rather a form of complex, incredibly powerful containment field holding something in check within it. Then a junior xenolinguist, Pip Squeak Holloway, poring over faint residual energy patterns on the sphere's surface, found something. "Captain, I think this is a locking mechanism. It's not a physical lock, it's mathematical, a sequence, a key." He pointed to a series of repeating fluctuations, almost imperceptible. "And Captain, our ship's warp drive emits a specific resonant frequency during its initiation sequence, if we modulate it slightly. I think it might match the final sequence key." "You think firing up our warp drive next to this thing might open it?" Aris raised an eyebrow. "It's a long shot, Captain. A very, very long shot. But the patterns are compelling," Lena admitted, torn between scientific caution and an almost unbearable curiosity. "Long shots are what the Starseeker does best," Aris said, a familiar glint in his eye. "Jax, prepare to initiate a micro-warp jump, precisely modulated to Squeak's frequency sequence. Just a flicker on my mark. Let's knock, shall we?" In the hallowed halls of the Concord Assembly on the tranquil world of Ethel, the Elder Council was debating the finer points of trade route demarcations in the Outer Rim, a discussion that had already spanned 3 solar cycles. Suddenly, every sensor array in the chamber, every warning system tied to the ancient Precursor monitoring networks, blared to life with a singular, terrifying alarm. Red lights bathed the serene council, and the ancient delegates, beings who had not shown alarm in millennia, stirred with a visible dread. "Report," demanded High Counselor Thuron, his voice like the grinding of tectonic plates. A trembling attendant, a being of pure light, stammered, "Counselor, it's the Great Seal. Sector RX-887, it's been activated. The hyperlane network, it's coming online." Back on the Starseeker, the microwarp jump, a mere flicker of distorted space, sent a precisely tuned ripple of energy towards the black sphere. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low hum began to emanate from the sphere, a sound that vibrated through the Starseeker's hull, through the very bones of its crew. Lines of light, like incandescent veins, traced intricate patterns across the sphere's surface, converging on a single point. With a soundless detonation of pure energy, a section of the sphere dilated, opening like a vast, dark iris. And beyond it, instead of the expected void, was a tunnel of swirling, impassable colors, a pathway of pure, condensed spacetime that stretched into unimaginable depths. "Sweet mother of galaxies," Aris whispered. "It's a hyperlane, a precursor hyperlane." "But they were legends," Lena gasped. "Galaxy-spanning transit systems shut down for a reason." The reason became apparent almost immediately. From the newly opened maw of the hyperlane, something emerged. It wasn't a ship. It was a wave of pure, malevolent energy, a shimmering distortion in reality that burned with an unnatural, soul-chilling light. It moved with impossible speed, expanding, coalescing, taking on a vaguely predatory form that defied Euclidean geometry, and it pulsed with an aura of utter primal hunger. On the Starseeker's bridge, instruments shrieked. "Massive energy surge, non-baryonic life form detected, hostile intent off the charts," the science officer screamed, his face pale. "Jax, get us out of here. Now," Aris roared, but it was too late. The energy being, or perhaps just a tendril of a much larger entity, swept past the Starseeker. The ship was buffeted, its shields flaring and dying in an instant. But the being didn't target them. It was focused on the hyperlane, the gateway now open to the wider galaxy. It plunged back into the swirling colors, but not before a pulse of its energy washed over the Starseeker, frying half its systems and leaving an echo of cold, ancient terror in the minds of the crew. Then more emerged. Dozens, hundreds, a swarm of these nightmare energy creatures pouring out of the reawakened hyperlane like wasps from a disturbed nest. And the hyperlane itself, no longer a single tunnel, began to branch, to spiderweb across the stars, ancient pathways flaring to life across the galaxy, visible even to the naked eye on distant worlds as new, vibrant, terrifying lines drawn between the stars. The network was re-energizing, connecting. And it was releasing its prisoners. The Conquered was in utter panic. The Great Seal wasn't just a lock on a hyperlane, it was a quarantine. The Precursors hadn't just shut down their transit system, they had used it to imprison the Xylos, a species of extra-dimensional energy predators they had battled and barely defeated eons ago. The hyperlanes were both their prison and the bars of their cage. And humanity, in its blundering, curious infancy, had just handed them the key. The humans, Counselor Lyra of the Sylvans, beings of plant-like intelligence, hissed, her fronds trembling. "Their reckless curiosity has doomed us all. They were warned to stay away from the silent sectors." "Blame will not shield us now," High Counselor Thuron stated, his ancient face grim. "The Xylos are free. The hyperlane network is their highway across the galaxy. Our fleets, our defenses, they are designed for conventional warfare. Against beings of pure energy who can traverse the galaxy in moments through this reawakened network, we are outmatched." News of the Xylos' incursion spread like wildfire. Planets on the newly activated hyperlane routes went dark, their populations consumed, their energies drained by the ravenous entities. The Conquered's mighty battle fleets, dispatched to intercept, found themselves fighting ghosts, their weapons passing through the Xylos with minimal effect, while the energy beings tore through their ships with effortless malice. Panic gripped the galaxy. The elder races, so long secure in their ancient power, were terrified. And what of the Starseeker? Crippled, adrift, but miraculously intact, they had witnessed the Exodus. They were also, by sheer, terrifying accident, the only known vessel to have interacted with a hyperlane control node and survived. Their sensor logs, though corrupted, held the only data in the galaxy on the energies involved in opening the gate and the initial behavior of the Xylos. A conquered rescue fleet, dispatched with desperate speed, found them, not to punish them, as Aris Thorne had grimly expected, but to escort them directly to Ethel. Captain Aris Thorne, Dr. Lena Hansen, and a bewildered Pip, Squeak, Holloway found themselves standing before the Galactic Concord's Elder Council. The air was thick with fear and accusation. "Your species," High Counselor Thuron boomed, his voice echoing with the weight of galaxies, "has, through its irresponsible actions, unleashed a threat that could extinguish all life in this galaxy. You have meddled with forces beyond your comprehension." Eris, covered in engine grease and still shaky, surprisingly didn't flinch. "With all due respect, High Counselor, that force beyond our comprehension was a big black ball in a sector you marked unremarkable. We're explorers. Finding things is what we do. Perhaps if the Concord was more forthcoming with its do not touch list, this might have been avoided." Lena Hansen stepped forward. "Counselors, we understand the gravity of what has happened. We are horrified. But our sensor logs, damaged as they are, might contain information. The resonant frequencies Pip discovered, the energy patterns of the gate activation, the initial Xylo's emergence, there might be something there. A way to understand them, a way to close the gates, or at least predict their movements through the network." The Concord was desperate. Their own scientists, for all their ancient knowledge, were baffled by the Precursor technology and the nature of the Xylos. Humanity, the reckless children, had accidentally kicked the galaxy's biggest hornet nest, but in doing so, they had also brushed against the hornet's entry point. They were, however unintentionally, the closest thing the galaxy had to experts on this specific catastrophe. A new, reluctant policy began to form. Humanity, previously a quarantined nuisance, was now central to the galactic crisis. They were the unwitting gatekeepers, cursed for their recklessness, but desperately needed for any insight, however accidental, into the hyperlane network and the Xylos. Human scientists, linguists who specialized in dead languages, as Precursor code was essentially that, and even a few daring or insane warp field theorists were rushed to Concord research outposts. Pip Holloway, the junior xenolinguist who had stumbled upon the key, became an unlikely celebrity, consulted by beings who had forgotten more than humanity had ever known. He found that Precursor mathematical language had a strange, almost intuitive resonance with some forms of human music theory, leading to breakthroughs in understanding the network's control systems. War against the Xylos was going badly. They were unpredictable, appearing and disappearing through the hyperlanes at will, consuming worlds with terrifying speed. But glimmers of hope emerged from the human-Concord collaboration. Lena Hansen, working with Jax and a team of Concord engineers, realized that the Starseeker's own warp drive, the thing that had triggered the gate, could, if modified, potentially create localized interference patterns within the hyperlanes, briefly disrupting Xylo's transit. It wasn't a weapon, but it could be a warning system, or even a way to temporarily render certain hyperlane segments unstable, diverting the Xylos or slowing them down. Humanity was forced to mature at an unprecedented rate. Their small, scattered fleets, previously squabbling over minor system disputes, were now part of a desperate galactic defense force. Their scientists, once focused on planetary concerns, now grappled with extra-dimensional physics and precursor megastructures. The bold exploratory spirit that had led to the crisis was now channeled into a frantic race for survival. They were still reckless, still prone to unconventional thinking, but now that very trait was their greatest asset. Elder Concord strategists, bound by millennia of doctrine, struggled to devise effective countermeasures against the Xylos. Human tacticians, unburdened by such history, proposed wild, audacious plans. using asteroids as kinetic barriers within hyperlane choke points, creating sacrificial energy beacons to lure Xylos swarms into carefully prepared traps, even attempting to communicate with the energy beings using mathematical sequences based on Pip's research into the gate mechanism. Some ideas failed catastrophically. Others yielded surprising, crucial successes. The galaxy watched with a mixture of fear and a new, grudging respect. These humans, who had stumbled into a galactic nightmare, were not cowering. They were adapting, innovating, fighting with a desperate ingenuity that bordered on madness. They were the children who had set the house on fire, but they were also the first ones rushing in to try and put it out, armed with nothing but courage and a willingness to try anything. The Xylos were still a terrifying threat. The war was far from over, but humanity's accidental expertise had given the galaxy a fighting chance. Earth, once a quarantined backwater, became a critical hub of research and strategic planning. Captain Aris Thorne, no longer just a reckless explorer, found himself a reluctant hero, advising conquered admirals. He still maintained that a good go-away sign would have been helpful. The legend of the Star Seeker and its naive crew who knocked on the door of oblivion spread. Humanity, the unwitting gatekeepers, stood at the nexus of galactic survival, a young species forced to bear an ancient burden, their future, and the future of the galaxy, now inextricably linked to the terrifying, beautiful, and utterly dangerous legacy of the Precursors. The universe had a dark sense of humor, Aris often thought. It had taken humanity's most defining trait, its boundless, often reckless curiosity, and turned it into both the cause of and the potential solution to its greatest crisis.